The first thing I noticed was the porch light. Not the weeds in the yard, not the paint peeling off the siding in tired strips, not the mailbox hanging crooked at the end of Maple Road with my father's last name still printed on one side in faded black letters. The light. It was burning over the front door of a house nobody had lived in for years. My father, Daniel Miller, had been dead for 9 days when I unlocked his front door for the first time as an adult. I did not come there to grieve. That sounds cold, but grief is hard to feel for a man you were taught to hate before you were old enough to understand what hate cost. I was 28, an HVAC tech with a work van full of tools, an apartment that looked like I was always ready to leave. I knew how to fix a furnace, patch a refrigerant line, trace a bad wire through a wall. I did not know how to stand in front of my father's house and decide whether I was allowed to miss him. According to my mother and my stepfather, Daniel left when I was 10.
They said he stopped calling, stopped showing up, stopped trying. My stepfather, Frank, used to say it like he was giving me a gift. Some men walk away, Eben. Be grateful you learned that early.
So I learned it. I built my life around it. I never asked too much from anyone. I never stayed where I was not wanted, and I never drove down Maple Road, even though a part of me always remembered that porch. When the county called to say Daniel had died and the house was now my problem, the plan was simple. Clean it out, make the minimum repairs, sell it to anyone willing to take it, then drive away before the place could start asking questions. But that porch light was still on. The power should have been disconnected. The house should have been dark. Instead, that yellow bulb glowed in the afternoon like someone had been expecting me. I tried the front switch first. Nothing. The light stayed on. I went to the utility closet, opened the panel, and found a circuit labeled in my father's blocky handwriting, "Porch, do not cut." That annoyed me more than it should have. Dead men do not get to leave instructions, especially not dead men who missed 18 years of birthdays. I removed the switch plate beside the door, thinking maybe Daniel had rigged some bad wiring I would have to undo. Behind it, folded tight and sealed inside a clear plastic sleeve, was a note. The paper was yellowed at the edges. The handwriting was careful, like whoever wrote it had expected time to read it before I did. It said, "If Evan ever comes home, leave the porch light on."
I stood there with the screwdriver in one hand and that note in the other, feeling something inside me shift in a way I did not want. Anger came first because anger was easier. If he wanted me home, where had he been? If he had cared, why did I grow up believing I was the son he gave up on?
I almost put the note back and walked out. Then I saw the calendar on the kitchen wall. It was 8 years old, covered in dust, still open to June. One square was circled in red, my birthday. Under it, my father had written 3 words. Light stays on. Before Maple Road pulled me back, my life was built around leaving. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment over a closed insurance office on the edge of town. I kept my clothes in 2 plastic bins, not a dresser. My dishes were mismatched. My walls were bare except for a calendar from the supply house where I bought HVAC parts. I told myself I lived that way because I was practical. The truth was, I never liked giving a place too much evidence that I had been there.
Most mornings, I was up before 6, drinking gas station coffee in my work van while the dashboard heater rattled like it was asking for mercy. I fixed other people's broken air conditioners, heat pumps, and furnace lines. I knew how to listen for a failing motor before it died. I knew how to trace a bad connection through a wall. I knew which customers would hover over my shoulder and which ones would leave a check under the mat.
Machines made sense to me, families did not. When the county called about Daniel Miller's house, I had just finished replacing a blower motor for a woman who kept apologizing for the mess in her laundry room. I almost let the call go to voicemail. The woman on the line said my father's estate had listed me as next of kin, and there were papers I needed to sign. I remember staring at the side of my van. Next of kin. That was a strange thing to call a son who had not been invited into his father's life for 18 years. I drove to my mother's house that evening because it felt wrong not to tell her. Ruth Whitmore still lived in the same brick ranch where I spent most of my teenage years. Frank's truck was in the driveway, clean as always, parked squarely in the center like the house had been built around it. My mother opened the door before I knocked twice. She looked smaller than I remembered. though I had seen her 2 weeks earlier. "Yvonne," she said, "is everything okay?" I told her Daniel was dead. Her face changed, but only for a second. Then Frank came in from the den, wiping his hands on a towel even though they were already clean. "What did he leave you?" he asked. "Not, are you all right? Not, I'm sorry. Just that." "A house," I said, "Maple Road." Frank gave a short laugh through his nose. "Of course he did. One last problem for somebody else to clean up." My mother looked down at the floor. "I said I was going to fix what I could and sell it." Frank nodded like I had passed a test. "That's the smart thing. Don't get sentimental over a man who couldn't keep a promise." There it was, the sentence I had grown up under. Daniel was unreliable. Daniel was selfish. Daniel left. Frank stayed. Frank paid bills. Frank showed up to school meetings. Frank taught me how to shake hands, how to mow straight lines, how to answer "yes, sir," even when my throat burned. He had done enough good that questioning him always felt like betrayal. Still, that night, something about his certainty bothered me. My mother asked if I wanted her to come with me to the house. Before I could answer, Frank said, "No need to drag this out. Evan can handle it." She closed her mouth. That was how it usually worked in their house. My mother felt something. Frank named it. The room accepted his version. When I left, she followed me onto the porch and touched my sleeve. "Don't stay there too late," she said. I almost asked why. But Frank was standing behind the screen door, watching us, so I just nodded and walked to my van. The next morning, I went back to Maple Road with a toolbox, a trash bag, and a promise to myself that I would not start caring. That promise lasted until I opened the utility closet. Inside, hanging from a nail beside the breaker panel, was a 3-ring binder with a cracked blue cover. I expected warranty papers, maybe old electric bills. Instead, every plastic sleeve held a receipt. Porch repair, June 2011. Replacement window, back bedroom, October 2012. New bedroom paint, March 2014. HVA service, January 2016. Roof patch over Evan's room, November 2018. I read that one twice. Evan's room. Not back room, not guest room, my room, a room I had not slept in since I was 10 years old. Each receipt had a note written in my father's handwriting. Short notes, practical notes, nothing dramatic. Keep dry before winter. Fix before birthday. Ask what he likes now. That last one sat in my chest like a stone. I carried the binder into the hallway and opened the door to the small room at the back of the house. I remembered it being bigger. Most childhood rooms shrink when you see them as an adult, but this one felt different. It had not been turned into storage. It had been waiting. There was a narrow bed against the wall with no sheets on it, a bookshelf with 2 old model airplane kits, a basic tools set still sealed in plastic. On the closet hook hung a jacket that would have fit me at 15, maybe 16. The tag was still on it. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to throw it across the room. Instead, I stood there and tried to make the facts line up with the story I had been handed. My father stopped trying. My father kept a room ready. My father forgot my birthday. My father circled it on an old kitchen calendar and wrote, "Light stays on." One strange note behind a switch plate could have been guilt. A room could have been denial. But receipts spread across 8 years were something else. They were a pattern. I crossed the yard to the house next door because I needed someone to tell me I was reading too much into it. Mrs. Alma Green opened the door with a coffee mug in one hand and looked at the binder like she had been expecting it. "You kept those?" she asked. "You knew?" She sighed and stepped onto the porch. "I knew pieces." That answer made my stomach tighten. She told me Daniel fixed that house every year, even when he could barely afford materials. He replaced the porch bulb before every birthday. He patched the roof after storms. He painted the back room once, then repainted it 2 years later because he said a teenage boy probably would not want pale blue walls. I asked the question before I could stop myself. "Then why didn't he come get me?" Alma looked across the yard at the glowing porch light. "You tried more than you were told," she said. "Letters came back. Calls got answered by other people. And after a while, your stepfather came over here and told me not to confuse you." The word confuse hit harder than it should have. Because I remembered being 10, standing behind a curtain while Daniel waited in the driveway during a rainstorm. I remembered Frank coming back inside with a wet box in his hands and telling my mother he didn't even ask to see him. For 18 years, that sentence had been a wall. Now, for the first time, I wondered what had been on the other side. The box marked Evan. If needed, sat on the kitchen table for an hour before I touched it again.
I told myself it would be junk. Old report cards, maybe a few photographs, but when I cut the tape and lifted the flaps, I found letters.
Dozens of them. They were bundled by year, and most had been returned unopened. Some were stamped "Return to Sender." A few had another word across the front that made my hands go cold. Refused. Not lost, not misplaced, refused. The first envelope was dated 2 weeks after my 11th birthday. The last one was from the year I turned 21. I opened them slowly because reading them all at once felt like standing too close to a fire. My father's writing was plain and uneven. He asked if I still liked baseball. He said he had painted the back room but did not know what color I would choose now. He told me he was sorry. He never blamed my mother. He never called Frank a liar. He only kept repeating one line. "The porch light is on if you ever want to come home." By the fourth letter, I stopped reading for emotion and started reading for dates. That was the only way I could breathe. I took a notebook from my work van and made a timeline on the kitchen floor. My parents' divorce, my mother's remarriage, the rainy night I remembered from the driveway, each returned letter, each repair receipt, each birthday marked on the calendar. Then I drove to the library and scanned everything. Paper disappears when families get scared. I saved copies on a flash drive and emailed them to myself. The next day, I went to the county records office. There were no dramatic secrets, no perfect document that explained my childhood, just small pieces that made a shape. A petition for modified visitation. A receipt for one consultation with a family attorney. A notice about missed child support from the same year Daniel lost steady work. And a note in his file copy called Ruth. Frank answered, "Evan needs stability. Try again later." I sat in my van outside the courthouse after that. My father had failed at some things. The records were honest. He had been late. He had been broke. He had not known how to fight a system that required money and clean paperwork. But failure was not the same as abandonment. Before I spoke to my mother, I went back to Alma. I asked her to tell me only what she knew. She confirmed Daniel had mailed letters for years. She remembered Frank coming to her porch and warning her not to confuse me. She admitted she had stayed quiet because she thought adults had already made the decision. I did not forgive her, not then, but I wrote it down. That evening, I texted my mother, "I need to talk to you, alone." She agreed. Frank came anyway. He stood behind her chair like a guard. I placed the folder on the table and kept my voice low. "I'm not here to yell," I said. "I'm not posting anything online. I'm not asking for money. I just need to know who decided I wasn't allowed to hear from my father." Frank reached for the folder. I moved it out of his hand. "No," I said, "not this time." My mother looked at the letters, then at the word "refused" stamped across the top envelope. And for the first time in my life, she did not let Frank answer for her. My mother did not confess all at once. Real life does not usually give you clean speeches or perfect apologies. It gives you long silences, half-started sentences, and people staring at a table because the truth has finally become heavier than the lie. She said Daniel had tried. Not always well, not always on time, not always in ways that made things easier for her. He had missed payments, he had lost work, he had shown up angry once, and Frank had used that one afternoon as proof for the next 18 years. But the letters were real. The calls were real. The box on the porch during that rainstorm was real. My mother pressed both hands around a coffee mug she had not touched and said, "I thought I was protecting you." I wanted to ask from what? From a father who kept my birthday on a wall. From a man who fixed a room I never got to sleep in. From the pain of knowing I had two parents who were both flawed, instead of one hero and one villain. But I did not say any of that. Frank did. "It was unstable," he said. "You were a child. Your mother needed peace." I looked at him then, really looked at him. For most of my Frank's certainty had filled every room before anyone else could breathe. That night it looked smaller, not harmless, just smaller. "Peace for who?" I asked. He did not answer. My mother cried, But she did not ask me to forgive her. I was grateful for that. I do not think I could have carried her guilt and my own grief at the same time. Before I left, she brought out the small box I remembered from the porch, the one Frank had carried inside when I was 10. It was still taped shut. I opened it later at Maple Road, sitting on the front steps under the light Daniel had refused to let go dark. Inside was a pocket knife with my name engraved on the handle, 2 expired tickets to a minor league baseball game, and a note in my father's handwriting. "I'll teach you when you're ready." That was when I finally cried.
Not loudly, not the way people do in movies. I just sat there with the knife in my palm and let 18 years of being unwanted become something else. Not fixed, not erased, just questioned.
Over the next few weeks, nothing dramatic happened. Frank did not beg. My mother did not magically know how to make it right. No court stepped in. No one handed me back the birthdays, the Christmas mornings, or the afternoons when my father had stood on one side of a door while I stood on the other.
But things changed.
I told my mother I would talk to her, but not with Frank speaking for her. I told Frank he was not welcome at Maple Road without asking first. I took the house off the market, not because I suddenly knew what to do with it, but because I was done letting other people rush me out of places where my name belonged. I fixed the porch first. Alma brought coffee one Saturday. A man from Daniel's old church helped me replace 2 bad boards. Nobody clapped, nobody made speeches. They just worked, and every now and then someone's told me a small story about my father.
By winter, the house still needed paint, the roof still needed money. My relationship with my mother was careful and uneven. But the porch was solid.
One evening, I replaced the old bulb with a new one and stood back as the light spread across the steps. For 18 years, I thought that light was proof of a man who left too late to matter. Now I wonder how many people live their whole lives angry at a door, never knowing someone on the other side was trying to keep it open.